Celtic obsession and let freedom ring. Goosebumps are guaranteed. Visit denverbrass.org. That's denverbrass.org.
DU hockey fans, this is David Carl, Denver alum and head coach of your Pioneers hockey team. Join me at Sully's Bar and Grill every Wednesday prior to home games at 6 p.m. for the David Carl Coaches Show. Come take advantage of food and drink specials, enter to win prizes, and get my insight on the weekend's opponent. I hope to see you at Sully's inside the Ice Ranch off South Park Drive, west of Broadway, in Littleton all season long. Go DU.
McClellan, far side, barrel, score! 2-0 Denver.
When you're smiling. Oh, hi. Michael Bublé here for Bublé Sparkling Water. The whole world, it smiles with you. 12 flavors, no calories, no sweeteners, all smiles. Bublé Sparkling Water.
It's bubbly!
The whole world smiles with you. Bubbly Sparkling Water. Crack a smile.
Don't miss a Folsom Field Friday night showdown under the lights as the Buffaloes battle USC in a Pac-12 clash.
Into the end zone! Touchdown, Colorado!
Fans are encouraged to wear black and can buy their football tickets at CUBucks.com. Make plans to come support the Buffaloes as CU continues Pac-12 conference play. The Buffaloes versus the Trojans of USC. Friday, October 25th at 7 p.m. at Folsom Field.
At Sport Clips Haircuts, we're on a mission to help our veterans with their education. In 2013, we established the VFW Sport Clips Help a Hero Scholarship Program. With the help of your generous donations, we've raised over $6 million and awarded more than 1,400 scholarships.
It is a football Friday. For the Denver Broncos, it may feel more like a funeral Friday as their playoff chase essentially comes to an end in spectacular fashion as they completely melt down against the Kansas City Chiefs last night. If you had a chance to listen to the post game, Sandy Clough and I ended up tackling that until midnight last night. Fielded more than a few calls from some upset Broncos fans, some confused Broncos fans. We'll do that again tonight, but after the shock maybe has sunken in on how poorly the Broncos performed. Remember, the idea was that this was a team that was only a few plays away from being much better, and this was their chance to prove it, win 3 in a row. Kind of showed that the mistakes, especially the last second ones against Chicago and Jacksonville, maybe were a bit of a fluke. Well, they weren't. The matter at hand is this team is not very good. Patrick Mahomes is lost in the first half to injury. He will miss 3 weeks after a teammate landed on his knee in the backside and dislocated a kneecap. Fortunately for the Chiefs, only 3 weeks. Really fortunately for the league, Patrick Mahomes is one of the most entertaining players in the league to watch. But you would think that that would help the Broncos. It was 10-6 when Mahomes was knocked out of the game. Matt Moore took over. Moore, prior to training camp, was being an assistant coach on his old high school football team. Was out of football last year. And you figure the Broncos probably stand a pretty good chance now, right? A 4-point game. They have a backup quarterback who hasn't played in over a year. You're at home. If you're the Broncos, you're thinking everything's about to go right. Nope. Not even close. Matt Moore goes 10 for 19 the rest of the way, 117 yards and a touchdown. And the Chiefs outscore the Broncos 20-0. 20-0 after Patrick Mahomes is knocked out of the game. The Broncos, who came in with a good rushing attack, weren't able to put much together at all. Phillip Lindsay averaged 3.3 yards a carry. Royce Freeman, 3.5. Lindsay with 11 carries for 36. Freeman with 10 for 35 and a touchdown. Neither of them was able to get much together of anything. Freeman had a 14-yard run. That was the longest run of the day for the Broncos. Cortland Sutton had a 41-yard catch, which was incredibly lucky. Great job by Sutton. Poor throw by Flacco. It somehow goes through a forest of Chiefs' arms. Sutton keeps his focus and pulls it down. That's 41 yards. Otherwise, the longest play of the game by the Denver Broncos offense was a dump off to Andy Janovich, who went for 22 yards. That was it. Joe Flacco was sacked 8 times. Not all of those his line's fault, but a lot of them his line's fault. Garrett Bowles ended up getting some hold calls. Again, I would argue, quite frankly, he probably should have had more. And I mean that from a coaching type angle. He should have held more often. He got a holding call on Frank Clark. Clark sacked Joe Flacco anyway. If you're going to hold, really hold him. And if you're going to get beat that badly, hold him anyway so your quarterback can stay upright. He's 34 years old. Flacco did not look good. He did not look like he was going to move the ball downfield. Holding the ball too long, looked indecisive at times. This has been a problem all season long for the Broncos. A disappointment, especially, I think, for the Broncos defense. They were game. They really were. For the early part of this contest on Thursday, they were really good to go. They stopped Kansas City twice with field goals when they could have been far worse than that. And this game could have easily been 21-6 early on. It wasn't. It didn't end up that way. So, for the Broncos, they have to take a long, hard look in the mirror. There is no more ability to look at your season and say, well, look, we have a great chance. Well, you don't. You don't have a great chance. You're 2-5. You have a terrible chance of making the playoffs. Even in an AFC where everybody seems intent on losing every single week, you just can't lose the game the way the Broncos did and realistically look at themselves and say, there's a chance for them to do something. There's not. Their playoff chances went poof last night. I also made the argument last night that I think that was the formal end to the Pat Bowlen era of Denver Bronco football. I think we've known that for a while. But I think that was it. This is the Joe Ellis era of Denver Bronco football. And it probably has been. But so many fans were talking about how this isn't what happened under Pat Bowlen. Well, correct, it didn't. It's happened under Joe Ellis. It's happened under John Elway. The season is almost certainly going to end in a losing campaign unless you truly believe they're going to only have 2 more losses the rest of the way. 3 more, I guess, technically will get you a non-losing season. So I guess they'd count that. But this is a stretch that hasn't happened since the early 1970s. 1970, 1971, 1972. That was the last 3 times the Denver Broncos had 3 losing seasons right there. That's what you're looking at. Almost 50 years. Have you come to accept, Broncos country, that this team isn't very good, or is there something that you look at and to cling on to hope to and say, okay, they're actually good. They're still good. Just extenuating circumstances last night, you didn't face Patrick Mahomes for the majority of the game. You were in the game until Mahomes went out. Let's put a finger on that pulse right now. Talk to Dave. Dave, how are you doing? Dave, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. How are you?
A little bit low. Well, I just think the mistakes that have been made and the chickens have come home to roost now of not, solidifying the offensive line. I don't know that any quarterback would have been able to do any good last night, whether it was mobile or not. I mean, you can't blow open holes to run through. You can't have a running game. And I think the AFC is such a missed opportunity because the AFC is going to be wide open. I almost see the Raiders catching up with the Chiefs now. I mean, who knows who's going to take this thing? San Diego looks pitiful.
No, you're right, Dave. I mean, you're absolutely right. And thank you for the call. It's an interesting situation in the AFC. It is very poor. And you're also right, by the way, when you mentioned the Raiders. The Raiders actually, they don't look good. Don't get me wrong. They don't. But they have a winning record, which is more than most teams in the AFC can say. And at least they kind of look like they're trending in the right direction. I mean, that's where they are. If the playoffs were to start today, you'd have the Patriots and the Chiefs with the byes. You would have Houston and Baltimore as the other division winners, and the wild card participants right now would be the Bills and the Raiders. The only other team with a winning record in the AFC is the Colts. That's it. There are 7 teams with a winning record. 7. And there's some bad teams. The Denver Broncos are fortunate there's some bad teams. 0-6 Bengals, 0-5 Dolphins, 1-4 Jets. They're the only things breaking their fall to the bottom. Dave's comments on the offensive line are absolutely right. The offensive line is terrible. Now, I think we knew that. I think we knew that coming in. The Broncos could argue that Juwan James getting hurt 10 plays into the first game is part of the equation, and I suppose it is. You're missing your starter. But James is a guy with an injury history. This can't be a complete and total shock. He's already missed 6 games with an injury that didn't require surgery. I don't blame him for that. I'm not a doctor, but it's unusual. So it's worth noting. And the line is poor. Garrett Bowles is not an NFL starting caliber tackle, period. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. I don't think anybody who's watched him since year one is going to surprise anybody. Broncos goofed up. They got a little clever. Instead of picking Ryan Ramczyk, who I know starts at right tackle for the Saints, I get it. Instead of picking Ramczyk, the consensus best tackle available, the Broncos got clever. They wanted the athlete. They wanted the big guy. They wanted the guy that tested well at the combine. That's what they got. They got a guy that looks great at a combine, not on an NFL football field. Connor McGovern is a guard miscast playing at center. Ron Leary is doing his best playing hurt. Barely practices. Juwan James doesn't play. This team is supposed to be at least a serviceable run blocking unit, and they had been for the most part until basically the Chiefs made a clear bet. Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, made it very clear they were going to do one thing. We won't let the Broncos beat them on the ground. We're going to make Joe Flacco beat us. We're going to make his offensive line get Joe Flacco enough time to do anything and make Joe Flacco beat us. It was very obvious that the Broncos were not up to the task, either the line or Flacco. And at least Flacco broke his 5-game interception streak. He didn't throw one in this one. He did fumble the ball 3 times, lost it once. So the turnover streak for Joe Flacco continues. This Broncos team's in a bad way. And it's not close to turning around either. They're not 1 or 2 players away, folks. Want to know what you think? The RamosLaw.com text line is 303-713-1043. You call it, you text it, still get on the program. The Broncos knew they were not a match for the Chiefs the moment they came into the game. And I'll tell you why I know that next. Over on the RamosLaw.com text line, that's 303-713-1043. If you'd like to participate, you can do. A couple good ones already. Patrick Mahomes showed the Madden curse is real. Who dislocates a kneecap during a QB sneak? Charles, text that in. True. Time for Bulls to go the way of Old Yeller. Well, that might be a bit extreme, but I get what you're saying. The problem when it comes to Bowles in his position is he's a first-round draft choice, so he's going to get as long a leash as you can imagine. Second, they don't have anybody else. Their backup is Elijah Wilkinson. He starts already. I don't know if eventually you maybe start looking at moving Bowles to the right. I don't think they're going to. I don't know. There are only two good outcomes for the Broncos this season. Text from 720-343. They come to the conclusion they have the QB of the future in Drew Lock, or they end up with a high draft pick. Somebody's listened to this show before. I've been making the argument for weeks. 4 weeks. During the win streak. Prior to the win streak. The single most remaining important goal for the Denver Broncos is to find out whether Drew Lock can be your quarterback going forward or not. Exactly right. Good job, Texter. From the 970-692, you guys were ready to talk playoffs last week, picking them to win and all. Terrible. No. Feel free to check the recording. You can go to 1043thefan.com. I don't know who you're referring to with you guys. This guy and this show did not. I picked the Chiefs to win. I picked them to win 27-20. I vastly overrated the Broncos offense, but I didn't think they were going to win. And I've told you all year, since the Oakland loss. One, I said they didn't think they'd make the playoffs because I picked them for the station to go 7-9. I was being generous when I did that. I should have gone lower. But at the time, this was a brand new show. First week, I didn't want to be the Debbie Downer for everybody. So I gave him a bonus, figuring, okay, maybe they'll pick one up. No. I still had him with a losing record, still had him missing the playoffs. And after they lost to Oakland, I've been consistent ever since then because there are only so many wins on this schedule. Ever since the Oakland loss, I've been telling you the Broncos will not make the playoffs. Not once have I changed it. I said that if they beat Kansas City, which I didn't pick them to win it, but if they did, then we could have a different discussion. Well, they didn't. They played one of the worst games in years. They were atrocious. 720-671. The Broncos are turning into the Miami Dolphins. They are such an embarrassment. The Dolphins at least have a plan. They are tanking to get Tua Tagovailoa. The Dolphins have a plan. So don't go comparing the Broncos to the Dolphins yet. The Dolphins actually have a plan in place that they're executing very effectively. So let's be fair about that. Whatever the Broncos' plan is, it's not going right. The Dolphins' plan is working. 970-294. It's time to lick the wounds and admit we suck and start getting capital for Miller, Harris, Sanders. Flacco is not the answer, never was. Well, I'll agree with part of you on that. Flacco is not the answer, never was. Correct. I had no problem with the signing of Joe Flacco. None whatsoever. We're trading for him, technically. The addition of Joe Flacco. I did have a problem with the restructure because the restructure now, it keeps the Broncos tethered to him for a little bit longer than you'd think. Unless you can find somebody who is willing to be a dance partner for you, like they were with Case Keenum. But I don't know many teams are going to be rushing to bail John Elway out again. To be totally honest, I just don't. The Broncos can't move away from Flacco prior to June 1st. If you do, the salary cap dead money hit is $13.6 million. If you're going to move away from Joe Flacco, you have to basically cut him or trade him post June 1st. Then your dead money is only $3.4 million. That at least is something you can live with. What strikes me as strange about the restructure is their dead cap money was zero because he was on the final year of his deal. There was no need to extend him. Teams were not falling all over themselves waiting for Joe Flacco to hit the open market. They used some of that money that they saved, just a little bit of it, to keep Andy Janovich. Now, you want to go sign Justin Simmons long-term in the next week or two? Then you can make the argument that the Flacco restructure made sense. Until then, you can't. The plan should have been, seemed to be, should still be, that Joe Flacco is here for 1 year. They didn't know they were going to be able to get Drew Lock. Drew Lock was being bandied about before the draft as being somewhere between the number 5 pick in the draft and the early second round, but even the second round was considered a little odd. The Broncos got him there. They had Joe Flacco as a hedge. Now, they went and got the quarterback of the future they liked, the one that John Elway followed around multiple times last college football season to go watch. So the plan was you were going to get Joe Flacco for 2019, maybe hope that he could push the sun up in the sky for an extra 5 minutes before it sets on his career. And then if he doesn't, okay, then you roll with Locke next year. That's fine. That didn't bother me. But now you're 2-5. Now I don't care if you're attached to Joe Flacco or not financially. It doesn't matter. What's the point? The Broncos, who could see Drew Lock return to practice next week, should be getting him ready to play on the road against Minnesota on the 17th of November. That should be the goal. That will give him 3 full weeks of practice, including a bye week. He can be activated in that time period. That's what the Broncos should be doing. You have almost a month to get ready for that. The Broncos play Minnesota 1 month from now and a day different. That should be Drew Lock's first start for the Denver Broncos. Assuming, of course, that the Broncos can keep him ambulatory and not have him sacked 4 or 5 times a game, and you have to get Lock in there earlier. But
Sean,
that's the plan.
You wouldn't play him against Cleveland at home?
No, because it doesn't matter if you win or lose that game anymore. You're not going to the playoffs. It makes no difference.
I mean, I guess my question is, why wait the extra week to go with the bye week into Minnesota?
Because I think the extra week of practice is going to help. Remember, he hasn't been able to practice with the team when he's on IR. You're not allowed to. I think you want to get him as many practice sessions as you can. The bye week gives you a longer time to prepare for Minnesota than usual, making him potentially more prepared. And the truth is, when you're an anticipated rookie, if you're an anticipated rookie in any sport, it's often easier to start for the first time on the road than at home where you feel all those expectations in that first game. Get that first start on the road. You don't feel like you have to impress the home crowd in some extra way. That's the best way to do it. Drew Lock should start on November 17th in Minnesota, regardless of what happens from here out for the Broncos. And if all goes well, Joe Flacco at that point should never start another game for the Broncos. They're going to need to find a trade partner. They're going to find someone who can dump a draft pick, a low draft pick of some variety. Who knows? Or the Broncos will just have to cut him themselves. If you can't find out, at that point, you'd have Minnesota, Buffalo, the Chargers, Houston, KC, Detroit, and Oakland, okay? 7 games left. If you can't figure out in 7 games whether Drew Lock should be the guy for your team in the 2020 season or not, then he's probably not the guy. And then that means you better prepare in the draft to go get one again. And that wouldn't even be the worst result because, as we've talked about, the Broncos have a lot of issues. I have complete confidence that Drew Lock can at least be a serviceable NFL backup quarterback, okay? I'm sure he could do. I haven't seen him play an NFL snap, but I'm sure he can be a serviceable NFL backup. At worst. Saw enough in college, I think, to be able to be comfortable saying that. If Trevor Siemian could do it, I think Drew Lock can do it. But the Broncos need to find out, is Drew Lock their long-term backup or their long-term starter? It's the most important question left for them. To do that, you have to play Drew Lock. It's that simple. I told you how I was going to explain that the Broncos were coaching scared from the get-go. Wanted to address everybody who's participating. This is I feel like I'm camp counselor tonight for all the frustrations, and I'm happy to do it. It's what I do. If you'd like to participate, ramoslaw.com text line is 303-713-1043. But I'll tell you why I could tell the Broncos were coaching scared from the opening kick next. The Denver Broncos knew that they were behind the 8-ball before the opening kickoff. They had a terrific opening drive. Now, it was aided substantially by a couple penalties. Couple third down penalties on the Chiefs kept it going. A face mask. They were going to go 3 and out, but a face mask extended it. Then the Broncos go down the field. They were going to have to either kick a very long field goal, a 57-yard field goal, or punt. But Rashad Breeland had a holding call. The Broncos keep going. And anyway, then they get in there. Flacco to Sutton for a touchdown. Then another penalty by the Chiefs let them get to the 1. And then the Broncos, showed that they were coaching a little bit scared and decided to go for 2 on the first conversion of the game. Now, if you want to make the argument that that's really, it's aggressive, Sean, that's not, it's an aggressive style of coaching. It is, I guess, but you're facing a team that's gotten an absolutely explosive offense, and you're not going to beat them with 8 points. 8 points wasn't going to get it done, okay? At no stage was 8 points going to get it done. So here was Vic Fangio talking about that decision. Oh, yeah, the fake punt, too. The other reason that you could tell the Broncos were coaching this game scared. Vic Fangio might not have had it both ways with that quote. I don't believe the 2-point conversion should be used until the late third or the fourth, but I was okay with calling it right there. And I know he doesn't call the plays, but he's the head coach. The buck stops there, and I think Fangio does know that. Your team decided to go for 2. So, there you go.
Sean, did you like the play call, though?
No. I was completely baffled as to why they were doing it.
I mean, if you're going for it from 1 yard out, I don't put Janovich in the backfield.
Well, I certainly did not like the choice of plays at the 1, for sure. I didn't like that. We talked about this earlier this week before the game, that the Broncos have gotten too clever at times. If you need, and we actually talked about a situation where it was 3rd and 1 or whatever, Kevin Kistner in the booth. Kevin and I talked about how one of the things for the Broncos needed to get better at is, look, on 3rd and 1, just put Royce Freeman behind Andy Janovich and run.
Don't overthink it.
Put 2 big guys in a line in an I formation and run. Just do it. But I didn't even like the call because, as I pointed out before, 8 wasn't going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs under any circumstances. Okay? Wasn't. Was not going to. So, if you make it, great, I guess. You get praise for going for it and being aggressive. But if you miss it, you give Kansas City momentum. Why? They were scared. They understood the kind of threat the Chiefs were posing to them. They understood that they were the inferior team. And they knew that they really couldn't do anything to combat it. So this is where I can pick on the coaching a little bit. The fake punt was a disaster. I mean, I don't even know how you draw that one up on a whiteboard and go, hey, this is how it'll work. Because, okay.
I mean, is bringing Spencer in motion not going to trigger it?
I don't know. I don't even know what that was.
The worst play call I've seen in my life.
Oh, no. You're forgetting the jet sweep to Noah Fant to start the season.
Oh, that's right.
This year alone, there's plenty to choose from. But the Broncos were coaching a little scared. And it's a condemnation of the coaching, yes, but it's also, at the same time, and I'll try to do it Fangio style here to try to have it both ways. It's also not. Because that's also the coaches maybe understanding we just don't have the personnel to hang with the Chiefs for 60 minutes. We don't. So if we get our chances to do anything, we have to try it, right? And that's what it seemed that they did. So it's just a total breakdown. This whole game was a total and complete breakdown in every way. The Broncos have been trying to mask their deficiencies, desperately trying to mask their deficiencies. They were fortunate to beat two last-place teams that happened to be placed in front of them in a row. At least the Chargers were in last place until last night. Broncos percentage points now, till Sunday at least, take that spot back from the Chargers. But that's all they've done. They beat two last-place teams, and then when they had a chance to actually prove that they were anywhere near the team that they'd been saying they were, they barely showed up. And if you're a Bronco fan, it's fair to be very, very frustrated by that. From the 970 on the RamosLaw.com text line, the minute they went for two and didn't get it, I knew it was over. Gave the Chiefs defense a boost and lost any momentum. Let's be honest, if not for the penalties on the first drive, they don't score at all. Then the trick play just tells your players we can't beat them heads up. It was hard to watch. That is a very, very good text. That's a good point. Those two moves, going for two there and the trick punt, basically do admit to the players and everyone else, we can't beat these guys straight up. We're not good enough to. And they're correct. So this is where it becomes hard to separate the coaching and the player personnel, right? I mean, which is it really? Which is it? I don't know. Obviously, it's not good coaching, but it's also not a good roster. So what coaches are going to do anything with it? This is the problem. Little by little, as your team hopefully gets better, you start to winnow down those issues and be able to say, okay, we know this part of our team's pretty good. So if we keep losing, we need to look over at this part. Okay, well, now we know we got a little better at this. Now we need to go look at these two positions. Okay, now we need to go do this and that. The Broncos just have to look at more or less their 53-man roster, their complete lack of depth, their first-year head coach, first-year offensive coordinator, and go, well, it's some of those things in some manner, all of them, but how much is what? It becomes very difficult to diagnose what it really is and how much of it you need to treat and in what order. That's where the Broncos are at right now. And they're going to go face an Indianapolis team who, by the way, beat the Chiefs team that just smoked you 30-6 with their backup quarterback. When the Colts beat the Chiefs, Mahomes was in. What game, if you're the Broncos or Broncos fans, can you expect them to win now? Cleveland? I guess Cleveland? I don't know. This is why the Drew Lock situation is really the only one that's worth monitoring. I don't necessarily think the Broncos should make any trades. I guess you could, there one possible exception, I guess you might be able to make a trade. I don't know. There's one player I don't think I'd mind moving on. I'll tell you who that is next. I'm okay if the Broncos decide to move on from Emmanuel Sanders. And this has nothing to do with Emmanuel Sanders' performance. It has nothing to do with how he's played. It has to do with the fact that you might be able to get something in return for him. He's not staying with the Broncos anyway. And even though if you go to Drew Lock, Sanders would be a valuable player to have, I think the idea that he could get frustrated looking for more targets as he has clearly moved to the number 2 option. Courtland Sutton is clearly the number 1 now. Knowing that he needs to put up some big numbers following his injury at his age to get a big new contract, I'd be okay with that. If the Broncos decided to figure out what they could get for Emmanuel Sanders and make that move, I'd be okay with that trade. I wouldn't trade Chris Harris Jr. because your starting cornerbacks would be Duke Dawson and Devontae Harris. Yikes. I mean, that's where you'd be at if you're the Broncos. Devontae Harris took every snap on defense. Chris Harris took 95% of them. Duke Dawson took 36%. That's the second most. Isaac Yiadom took a grand total of 3 snaps. So your starting cornerbacks would be Devontae Harris and Duke Dawson. This presumes that Bryce Callahan, I guess at some point will probably play. But I'm still not willing to just give up on Chris Harris. I think there's a chance that Chris Harris can do enough on a bad team that he's going to get a decent contract, which gets the Broncos a better compensatory pick. I understand that's in 2021. But I think that's probably a better choice. That's what I would do if I were the Broncos.
I got one for you.
Yeah.
And I'm stealing it from Nick Ferguson, but I think I'll give him the credit.
Okay.
Would you trade Courtland Sutton?
No. Why on earth would I trade Courtland Sutton?
Because
Why?
You don't need elite wide receivers to win Super Bowls. And you're in you should be in a complete rebuild here.
Well, what are you going to get for Courtland Sutton?
I don't know. Do you think you could get a first or a second for him?
No, not remotely, not yet. He hasn't even really had a breakout yet.
What if
he had 700? He's on pace for a 1,000-yard season, but so what? No. Oh my gosh, no.
Well,
that's a terrible idea.
What if there was a team that was dying to have him in the draft?
Great.
And we picked ahead of him.
Then you can trade for him if you have a top 10 pick in the draft, I guess. No, there's no reason to trade Courtland Sutton. You need to be collecting talent, not dumping talent. They have a guy in his rookie contract. That's the most valuable thing you can have in the NFL. No. That is an awful idea. Go to the phone, Randy. Randy, please have a good idea, not a terrible one like trading Courtland Sutton.
Hell no, definitely not. Sean, I called in. I talked to you and Sandy last night.
Right.
This is Randy from California. I knew, I had to hit the phones as soon as you said you had a player in mind to trade. I knew it was going to be Emmanuel Sanders. One thing I want to say about that, wasn't it amazing to hear him basically call out Scangarello last night in the locker room?
It sure sounded as if it was about the play calling, and we'll play that as soon as you and I are done, Randy. But it did seem like in the locker room, Emmanuel Sanders made a somewhat oblique comment and would not elaborate that may have had to do with the play calling or the composition of the roster, or maybe his quarterback. That's the thing. He left a lot to the imagination there. But one thing was very clear. Emmanuel Sanders wasn't happy and didn't seem to think there was a lot of hope left. And that is another factor in the decision-making. Guys who don't seem to have a lot of hope left, and I don't blame him for not having it, but guys who are free agents, don't have a lot of hope left, some of them have a tendency to try to just go get theirs. And if there is one position where that actually works, it's wide receiver. But I think that's another reason that it's okay. I have nothing against Sanders. Sanders has been a really good player.
This is what I'll say, Sean. I'm glad he did it, because everybody's been sugarcoating it, not really wanting to speak about it. But enough is enough. Like, we continue to watch this team come out week after week, quarter after quarter, half after half, with no adjustment. And one thing I want to just throw out there, this was a conversation I was having today with a fellow Bronco fan. I think the Broncos should really look back at the first week versus the Raiders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what the Raiders did on offense is something that I think we should consider doing. They had a very fast, quick, play up-tempo system where it didn't allow Vaughn and Chubb to get through to apply any pressure, and it was effective. They picked up, no real superstars at the wide receiver threat. You had Jacobs, a rookie. It was very effective. They got their 5 quick yards on the ground. They went 5 more quick yards in the air. And how our offensive line is built, and with Joe Flacco, I think we got to do something where it's based around just getting the ball quickly out of his hands and not allowing the offensive line to really have to stand there and be in a position to block for longer than 5 seconds, because we know it's not going to happen. I think they really should look at something like that, and I think that's the only chance that we have for this offense to be something moving forward. But Sean, that's all I got for you, man. Thank you for having me on again. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, Randy, for the call. Thanks for listening out there in Cali. We know there's Broncos fans out there because we saw the Chargers game, and it looked like a home game. So there's definitely plenty of Broncos fans out in California. I love the point, because I made that same point after the Raiders game, that this is what teams were going to do to the Broncos, but it is something that the Broncos themselves, in theory, can do. At least make things quick like that. Try to make sure that edge rushers can't destroy them. Part of the problem for the Broncos, though, that Oakland didn't have to worry about, when the Broncos played the Raiders, they didn't have Mike Purcell in the middle, and they didn't have Alexander Johnson up the middle like they do now. Because of that, they knew the Broncos could bring no pressure right up the gut. Other teams can bring pressure right up the gut on the Broncos, and the Broncos can't stop it. So that's a problem too. But to me, this is another reason, among many, why a month from now, month and a day, Drew Lock should be starting. Drew Lock played in a college system. Yeah, he played mostly from the shotgun. I get it. It's one read, one look type systems, like most college systems are now. But what Randy is suggesting, that works in concert with someone like Drew Lock, who's got a pretty quick trigger. It might be an easier way to ease him into the NFL. Those are good points. I mean, those could work. Regarding the scheme itself, we have that is the quote from Emmanuel Sanders. Oh, from Fangio regarding the scheme. I want to play that for you now. That thump you just heard was Rich Scangarello going under the bus from his head coach. Ouch. At the same time, the Broncos hired a first-year play caller. And I'm not willing to necessarily look at Scangarello now. Obviously, the adjustments have not been there all year. But the Broncos are an atrocious offense, right? There's no sugarcoating that anymore. They are horrendous. They're 29th in scoring now. They're the only team that has played in Week 7 so far. So Kevin looks it up and finds that out.
16 points a game.
Ooh. And I know some teams have had their bye weeks, but 16 a game. Over the last 3 games, however, when have the Broncos scored? First drive? When it's scripted. Now, Broncos are averaging 16 a game. Last couple games, touchdowns on their first drives. That's half of their output for the entire game on the first drive. So I look at it, and I think that maybe Scangarello has it in him, potentially, Everyone's expecting this to happen immediately. First-year head coach, first-year coordinator. This is the drawback of hiring people who don't have the experience. There's no two ways around it. There just isn't. The Broncos have put themselves in so many precarious positions that if one little thing goes wrong, the whole thing falls apart. It's a Jenga tower of incompetence. And that's where they are. Curious about the idea about how this offensive line can get better. One of the ways it could get better is Jawan James could play. When will that be? Well, we might have some notion, courtesy of Vic Fangio. We'll let the coach tell you next. there's one thing that's very clear with Broncos country right now. It is that I think the fan base may be done with Garrett Holds Bowles. I think that might be about it. And as I pointed out in the opening segment, the truth of the matter is Bowles actually should have been holding more, at least save your quarterback the beating. You're going to lose 10 yards on the hold as opposed to lose 8 yards on the sack. And by the way, Flacco fumbled 3 times last night. Not 1, not 2, but 3. 3 fumbles. That can't be done. Some of that's on Flacco, but Garrett Bowles, of course, has to find something he can do. I think that Mike Munchak has gotten him to play somewhat better. I don't know what that means, but I think he has. Their only other option, though, would be Elijah Wilkinson. He's the only other tackle on the team. Well, you can't play Elijah Wilkinson over at left because he has to start at right because Juwan James hasn't played because of a knee injury of some mystery that has kept him out all season except for 10 plays. For a couple weeks, the idea is maybe Juwan James could play this week. Well, okay, he's not quite feeling it. Well, maybe this week. Well, Vic Fangio spoke a little bit about why Juwan James didn't play. You might find it pretty interesting. So wait, so he's cleared medically, but hasn't cleared recovery and rehab? How do you get cleared medically if you, maybe I don't understand. But, okay, if he's cleared medically to play, but he doesn't get to play because he hasn't practiced. Okay. Well, Ron Leary almost never practices because I think they're just holding him together with duct tape and popsicle sticks. And he still plays every week. The Broncos gave Juwan James, and I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it was $51 million. At the time it was signed, it was the largest contract ever given to a right tackle in history. Yeah, 4-year, $51 million. A chance to look that up. It was since broken. Trent Brown of the Raiders broke it a little bit later, but at the time it was signed, it was the biggest contract ever given to a free agent right tackle. Ron Leary's out there playing hurt, playing without practice. Juwan James is medically cleared and can't play. Well, I guess we can count on him playing against the Colts then, right? Instead of the short week, you have a long week. He's been medically cleared, so I guess should be ready to go. So, looking forward to Juwan James being back against the Colts. I guess we can fairly say that, right? I guess we'll just say that. Juwan James should start against the Colts. According to Vic Fangio, he's already been medically cleared. He just hadn't got enough practices in. How about a week and a half worth of practices? Will that be enough? So great. So Juwan James is back, everybody.
Maybe. I mean, the word we're hearing is the dude doesn't like to fight through an injury.
Neither do I.
But if you're making...
I don't make $51 million. My job is just to talk. It's hay fever season. You think I like working through that? No. But I suck it up. I'm not suggesting that Juwan James is being a wimp or anything of the nature. But if you're medically cleared and they desperately need you, you're not playing? Wow. So, I guess we're just going to presume he's back against the Colts. So maybe Elijah Wilkinson can start at left tackle. How bad does it have to be for the Broncos to try that? Maybe Eric has some ideas. Eric, how are you doing?
Sean, I'm doing well. Quick comment before I get to my point. You just mentioned that Ron Leary doesn't practice.
Not much.
Do you really want Juwan James to play like Ron Leary? I mean, for crying out loud, that guy can't block much better than Bowles does. You know, Sean, I'm going to be honest with you. I told your call screener. The biggest problem I see with this organization, and I'm gonna limit it to since when Elway took over, although there was some of it going on even before Elway got the job. Sean, at some point you got to commit to something. You got to commit to a coaching staff. You got to commit to a coordinator. You got to commit to a quarterback. You have to say, this is who we are. We're going to develop. We're going to build. We're going to build around this. And these are the fundamental principles we're going to look to try to achieve. You know, Sean, you can't hire a new coach every other year, a different scheme every other year, and think that the talent you drafted 3 years ago is going to fit the scheme of the coach you just hired 6 months ago. There is absolutely no commitment from this organization. Now, yeah, I'm a lifelong Steeler fan. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, and the Steelers are the other extreme on this one. We've hired 3 coaches in 51 years.
Right.
I'm not necessarily convinced that's the way to go either at times. But, Sean, in the last, 9 years, how long has it been since Shanahan was fired? Now, 10 years? He was fired in 2009? Was McDaniels brought in 10 or 9? They've gone through 6 coaches in 10 years, Sean.
Right.
6.
Right.
I mean, this is Cleveland Browns West, and the results are starting to show it. You know, you can't bring in a new free agent quarterback. You know, Sean, I'll be honest with you. I think the worst thing that happened to Elway when he first came on board, and he had that boondoggle free agent season where he brought in Talib and he brought in Manning and he brought in,
Sanders
TJ
and Ward,
and the whole
right?
group.
Yeah.
He fell in love with the idea of the quick fix, that he could take someone else's cast-offs and turn them into gold. And the reality is, Sean, there's a reason Juwan James left Miami. As bad as Miami is, you honestly think if they thought this guy was an all-pro tackle, they'd have said, no, we don't need that. You know, you can't take everyone's cast-offs every year and think you're building a championship. Now, I will acknowledge when you have a team that's close to being able to contend, and you can bring in long-in-the-tooth veterans who still have some game and plug them in, which is what Belichick's been doing for years, and frankly what Elway did with that first free agent boondoggle, yeah, that can work. But you can't rebuild through other teams' cast-offs, and you can't change you can't change your coaching staff every 18 months and think you have any sort of continuity. These players don't even know what the heck they're doing anymore. The coaching changes every other frickin' month.
Eric, it's a great call and a lot of very good points. There's absolutely something to be said about that. And part of the problem with the continuity is in the last couple hirings, they went and got first-time guys. Anytime you go get first-time guys, you're not really sure if they're going to work or not. You don't actually know. Now, same time, much like free agent players, right? There's a reason a coach becomes available, maybe. You don't necessarily know. But Eric, I thought that was a terrific call. A lot of very good points about free agency, about the quick fix, especially when you look at in the last couple years, the free agents the Broncos have brought in. It does seem that Elway just kind of thinks that you can wave a magic wand. They'll come to Denver, and the magic touch of the Broncos since the early 80s will just magically turn them into something else that it won't. And it is a flaw that the Broncos have made. And it can't cover up bad drafts. And both of those things have really put the Broncos in a situation where they don't want to be. Got some calls on hold. We'll make sure we get back to them on the other side. We'll talk to all our callers and everyone else on the RamosLaw.com text line next. After the Broncos' crushing loss on Thursday Night Football, embarrassing, humiliating loss. Thursday Night Football, nowhere to hide for the Broncos. Their faults exposed for everyone to see. The former emperor has no clothes. Broncos, 3-time world champions, do not look anything like the sort. Butch has been holding. Want to go right to him? How are you, Butch?
Getting on with Sean. What's going on?
Yep, same old, same old.
Boy.
We're back to losing again.
Yeah. I'm gonna. I promise you, I'll stay within the FCC guidelines. As tempting it is to get out of those, I don't want to get in trouble. And before I get to what I really want to talk about that just disgusting, embarrassing, infuriating, gutless, heartless, and soulless performance about Chris Harris, I thought he was a non-smoker.
Maybe I'm the joke.
Because after that pass to Tyreek Hill, man, I think he's still smoking.
Oh,
it's just a joke to lighten the mood.
I get you. Okay. Yeah, they didn't give. They didn't give a lot of help either. I mean, that was a play where they basically said it's you 1-on-1 against Tyreek Hill, and on a slant, no one's going to hang with him.
I know, that's just a joke.
Yeah, I get it.
We're better with Harris than without him. We're better with him than without him. But I just thought I'd mouth off about how great he is and everything. And I mean, we're better with him than without him.
Oh yeah,
but really,
it's a bad spot.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're fine, Butch. Please go ahead.
Okay. I've probably been more furious after a Bronco game, but not too many times. I mean, pick a defense. The 2015 Broncos, 85 Bears, 03 Buccaneers, 2001 Ravens, whatever. The Steel Curtain. I mean, you made a glorified practice squad look like the second coming of all those great defenses. And the lack of adjustments, Fangio, to me, I know he doesn't have a lot to work with, but I mean, to have to ask reporters what the score was when Mahomes went out, that's very concerning. That's very concerning to me. And I mean, you drive down the field like a chainsaw through melted butter, and you make no adjustments. I mean, I've heard callers bring this up. Do they not have a hurry-up offense? Does Joe Flacco? I mean, it's a proven fact that when a team's sending 7 or 8 guys, there's somebody open. Period. The end.
Exactly right.
No screen passes.
Doesn't seem to be. At least nothing that one of our texters noted as well.
How does a guy 6'6" get that many passes blocked?
Well, the guys are directly in his face is part of it, but yeah,
I know
it's been a concern. I mean, and I appreciate it, Butch. Thank you, but it has been tough. Flacco has not been quick with the ball. The Broncos' offensive line has gotten pushed around here and really all season long. But one of the points you brought up, Butch, I do want to address that's very worthwhile, and I think you did bring it up. We've talked about how bad the Broncos' offense looked. It's almost inexcusable given how bad the Chiefs' defense really is. They have basically, in the last couple seasons, punted on building the defense because they just know they're going to outscore everybody. They worked on building this race car offense that works beautifully, apparently even with Matt Moore running it. And the Broncos couldn't do anything, even on the run. And keep in mind, maybe the best defensive player on the Kansas City Chiefs is defensive tackle Chris Jones. Might be the best guy they have, plugging up the line in the middle. He didn't play last night. He was hurt. The Broncos still couldn't do anything on the ground. That's an atrocious defense that was missing their man in the middle of the defensive line. And the Broncos couldn't run on them. Yikes. On the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043. You can call it or text it. Couple good points. And the idea with Flacco, same thing. Keith and Greeley says, just curious. Has Joe Flacco ever called an audible? I can't recall one that I've seen. Not doing it a lot. He's certainly not Peyton Manning at the line. And Peyton Manning, keep in mind, sometimes those actually weren't even audibles. He just wanted the defense to think that he'd figured it out and maybe they'd show something. But you're right. Flacco tends to just walk up there, call the count up, snap it, and go. So that's a strange thing to see. It's a good point. 720-435. Flacco can't make quick decisions. He hasn't been. Many of his sacks are to do with the Broncos' porous Swiss cheese style offensive line. But not all of them. I can think of at least half a dozen this season off the top of my head that were completely Flacco's fault because he's holding onto the ball way too long. And that's just off the top of my head. At least 6. And I would include 2 of those last night as part of that, too. 2 of the 8. 720-270 is Moore better than Flacco? Well, I don't know if he is, but he was last night in every way you can imagine. Quarterback rating of 89.1 for Matt Moore, 79.7 for Joe Flacco. QBR, by the way, 36 for Moore. Not that that's all that impressive. Flacco, 8.3. Not 83, 8.3. Patrick Mahomes, by the way, was 92.2 on the QBR and 125.8 on the ratings because he was 10 for 11 for 76 and a touchdown. If you would have thought into this game that the Broncos were going to get outrushed by the Chiefs, I picked the Chiefs to win that game. I didn't think the Broncos were going to win, but I certainly thought the Broncos would end up with more rushing yards. They didn't. LaShawn McCoy almost outrushed the Broncos by himself. And undoubtedly would have if he had gotten the ball a little bit more. Freeman and Lindsey combined for 71 yards on 21 carries. McCoy came up only 7 yards short of that on 12. This was just a remarkable game. Prior to the touchdown catch by Tyreek Hill, as one of our texters points out, Hill had 2 catches for 17 yards. That was it. It's not like he was dominating them. Travis Kelce had 6 catches for a grand total of 44 yards. If you would have said the Kansas City Chiefs coming into this game would have passed for 191 yards, rushed for 80, and Travis Kelce would have had 44 yards receiving and no touchdowns, wouldn't you have assumed the Broncos would have won that game? I probably would have. Just on those raw stats, I probably would have assumed the Broncos would have won that game. They didn't even come close. They gave up 30 unanswered points, 20 of them when Matt Moore was a quarterback at home on a national game, on a 2-game winning streak, against a team with a worse injury situation than their own on a 2-game losing streak, who loses their quarterback, the MVP of the league. Think of all those things all happening. They all happened. All of them. Von Miller didn't get a sack in this game. That's the least of their problems because he actually did get a sack. It got wiped out. So maybe everyone looks at it and realizes it's not Von Miller's fault anymore. He's just one of the 53 guys. It's a lot more than that. Spot of good news, by the way. The Colorado Avalanche, after a very poor first period tonight out in Florida, came roaring back and took the game to overtime. Tell you how that turned out next. Out in Florida, the Colorado Avalanche started out their game pretty poorly. Now, it was the first game of a back-to-back. They have the Tampa Bay Lightning tomorrow. So this feels like a game you'd like to get. They haven't actually lost yet. They've had one overtime loss in their previous game. But they came out very, very, very flat. That's fair to say. They were down 3-1 after one period. Did not look very good. All those goals were even strength. A shorthanded goal was given away too. That's the second in 2 games for the Avs. Probably need to be a little less aggressive on the power play. Jonas Donskoy gets his third as he really gets the only Avs anything going in that first. But in the second, they come charging back. Matt Nieto gets a goal. Andrei Burakovsky gets his third. For the Avs, tied up 3-3. Unfortunately, they cough it back up. Brett Connolly scores for Florida, but only 16 seconds later, Burakovsky strikes again. Donskoy on assists on both of Burakovsky's goals. So we got a 3-point night for Donskoy. 2 goals on Burakovsky. So you're already good shape there with the new guys. Third period, all of a sudden, after 8 goals have been scored in the first 2 periods, the goalies just go, nope, enough of that. Third period, no goal scored. Nobody. Game goes to overtime. 3:03 into overtime. Burakovsky gets point number 4 on the evening. This time setting up Nathan MacKinnon, who punches in the overtime winner. The Avs move to 6-0-1. They have had as good a start as you could hope for. MacKinnon, by the way, missed the morning skate today because he didn't feel well. His leg was sore after that loss to Pittsburgh, the overtime loss to Pittsburgh. MacKinnon went ahead and played anyway and said after the game, I knew I was going to play the whole day. It's great. Shows the resilience our team has. We're a calm and confident group. Grubauer stopped 40 shots. Don't expect to see Grubauer tomorrow. It'll probably be Pavel Francouz in the net against the Lightning. The Avs at the moment definitely playing with house money. They're like I mentioned, they're 6-0-1, 13 points. The next closest team in the Central, St. Louis, 3-1-3. They have 9. Only Nashville at 4-3 even has a winning record. Winnipeg, Chicago, Dallas, Minnesota off to pretty middling starts. Dallas and Minnesota's case, they're combined 1-13-1. That's being nice. Bad starts. Tampa Bay 4-2-1. The Avs come in hot. They end up knocking off the Panthers in OT and giving maybe a nice wave to old friend Joel Quenneville, who now coaches down in Florida. But you look at these goals that the Avs are punching in and the guys that are doing it, it's pretty impressive. Like I pointed out, the first goal was Donskoy. Colin Comfort with the assist. The next goal, Nieto. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare and Calvert with the assist. Bellemare, one of the new additions. Then Burakovsky again from Donskoy and Zadorov. And then Burakovsky from Donskoy and Cole. Cole, in addition, by the way, last year, he had 2 assists. And then MacKinnon gets this from Burakovsky and Sam Girard. Give Joe Sakic a ton of credit. It's funny how a couple years ago, the question was, is Joe Sakic ready for this job? He was a great player, but can he really handle being the GM? Does he really understand the nuances? Can he find a balance between signing his own guys, between drafting and then signing the right free agents? That's what they were talking about 2 years ago with Joe Sakic. Not too many people were talking that way about John Elway. They've flipped spots. Sakic, the Hall of Fame great, seems to have settled into his job very nicely indeed. Getting the contracts done you want to get done with his own guys. Making shrewd trades like he did with Matt Duchene last year, like he did with Tyson Barrie this offseason. They have made good moves. Really good moves. It's paid off very nicely. This has been an impressive start for the Avs. And quite frankly, given the scoring that they are getting up and down their lines, it feels to me like it's sustainable. Now, they're not going to go winless through the whole season, don't get me wrong. But this seems like a legitimately very, very good team. Nazem Kadri, by the way, the centerpiece of that Tyson Barrie trade, didn't get a point, but won 68% of the faceoffs tonight. That's a big deal. Something the Avs have been terrible at not that long ago. This second line, Burakovsky, Donskoy, and Kadri, no, they're not McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen. But that's a line that's getting you points, getting you a lot of points. And they already look like they've played together for a year. They've played together for 7 games. All 3 of those guys are new additions. They look immediately very, very effective together. Burakovsky has 8 points already in 7 games. Donskoy has 6. Kadri has 4. And he's looked like their best faceoff man. The Avs, I've been telling everyone since the Barrie trade, the Avs are a dark horse team to win the Cup. They keep starting like this, that we're going to remove the dark horse label. But they are legitimate. This is fascinating to watch. The key is Grubauer, bad start, and then has a tough go of it, but then ends up doing what you'd hope. Not always going to have those great starts. To me, watching Grubauer mature into that top goalie is going to be the kind of the make or break part for the Avs. They can go as far as Grubauer can carry them. Even though they're young, coughs them up early, but then saves 40 goals on the whole, including 2 on the power play. Stops the bleeding for his team to be able to get back into the fight. They do, and then they take it. And then they get that win. So another exciting game for the Avalanche. 6-0-1, the best they've ever... We're getting ahead of ourselves. And there's a very good chance they'll just straight up lose tomorrow, let's be honest. But the Avs' best start ever is 12 games without a regulation loss. This is pretty impressive. And it couldn't come at a better time because as the Broncos self-immolate, maybe you're not a hockey fan, but you're still going to probably want something else to watch. That's my guess. Assuming that the Avalanche continue this kind of play, though, will be worth taking a peek at when they are on your NBC Sports networks or those kind of situations until everything else gets situated. But a great performance for them, and we'll see what they do in Tampa Bay. Maybe take one more point, and the Avs will feel great about that entire road trip when they come back. There's a baseball game tonight, too. The World Series is not quite set, and we still have more to touch on the Denver Broncos. Yes, it's there's that much. There's that much. There's that much that's gone wrong. I have an interesting quote from Mike Evans that I want to play you. Mike may be getting to the end of his rope with this, too. We'll hear from him next. So the Broncos now at 2-5. Playoff chances are over. I know, not mathematically over. And if you want to be like John Belushi in Animal House and insist that it wasn't over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor, and it's not over now, go crazy. Enjoy. But it's over. They're not going to the playoffs. The Broncos are going to have their third losing season in a row, almost certainly. And even the folks like me who predicted 7-9 may end up looking like optimists. So, Mike Evans brings up it's a morning after type point. But the Broncos are going to have a losing season. They're not going to make the playoffs. Joe Flacco does not look like he has much left in the tank. The Broncos' offensive line isn't very good. Chris Harris, Emmanuel Sanders, Derek Wolfe, among others, are probably all walking at the end of the year. Mike thinks maybe it's time to just start over. Charade. Wow. Mike breaking out the French. You know he's serious. This the problem behind this, and you could make the argument, is we speak to something beyond that, right? There's not enough talent on the roster. Multiple coaching staffs get cycled through. The GM, despite the fact being a living legend in this town and justifiably so, hasn't been very good. And if his name wasn't John Elway in the last, this time he'd be looking at very hard questions. If he was still in the role, he'd be looking at some really, really hard questions. The challenge with all of this, of course, goes back essentially to ownership or the lack thereof. Joe Ellis is the de facto owner of the Broncos. He is because the trust that he runs says he is. And the trust owns the team. Plenty of time to get into that as much as you'd like. But consider this. What makes anybody think that if the trust gets what it wants, and what it wants very clearly, all the legal hurdles that still remain notwithstanding, the trust very clearly wants Brittany Boland to be the owner of the Denver Broncos. Clearly. That's what they want. Brittany Boland is 28 years old. The other owners are not going to immediately ratify a 28-year-old owner who hasn't really worked for the football team for a significant amount of time. She's starting to do that now. Would they even ratify a 38-year-old owner? Well, maybe probably then, but that's 10 years away. And then beyond that, with all due respect to Brittany Boland, who I've had the privilege of meeting a couple times and seen her work at charitable events, very likable, very smart. But why is there a presumption that Brittany Boland will just be Pat Boland as an owner? She was 8 years old when the Broncos won their first Super Bowl. And at that point in time, Pat Boland had been the owner for roughly 15 years. So why is there this presumption that, oh, well, if Brittany gets it, then it'll all be back? Why? What makes you assume that? What makes you think that she's just naturally going to have the exact same skill set? Who knows? Now, maybe she could be better. It's possible. But Boland's a Hall of Fame owner, Pat Boland. To presume that you're going to get that back-to-back? Other teams have tried. It doesn't usually work that way. And I think fans who are looking at this are starting to understand that an organizational top-to-bottom situation is what's caused where the Broncos are right now. And it's going to take a top-to-bottom fix in order to get it right again. Now, the Broncos can continue to tread water. I think they can get back to being 8-8, 9-7 type of team in a couple years if all the things go right. They don't look close to it to me, but they could do it in a couple years if everything goes right. But are Broncos fans comfortable with that? This team hadn't had back-to-back losing seasons since 1972. Now, that was the end of a pretty long string of losing seasons all the way back into the AFL days. And so you'll hear that 72 bandied about for a while. But they hadn't even had 2 straight losing seasons since 72. Now you're looking at 3. And everyone's eyes are looking towards Brittany Boland and saying, well, she's the savior. All the glory days will be back again as soon as Brittany Boland takes over. I hope so, assuming she ever does. I don't know how this is all going to play out legally. But I sure don't assume it. So Broncos country, why do you? And are you willing to wait 5 years, 10 years for this to happen? She just started working for the team, right? According to what the trust had been said, needed 5 years. That's why Beth Boland-Wallace argued that they got rid of her after 4. So 5 more years until Brittany Boland could conceivably be brought up as the owner of the Broncos if everything goes the way the trust hopes. 5 more? It's a big number. And that presumes then that the 33-year-old Brittany Boland would be able to be immediately ratified by the other owners. Not sure that's the case either. There's no quick fix here. The only quick fix here is to sell the team to someone else. That seems to be the one idea the Broncos country doesn't want to embrace. But on a Friday night after one of the worst losses I can remember, it might be the Broncos' best hope. It's been fun doing the show as always. Get back to it next week. Thank you very much to Kevin Kistner in the booth. Congratulations, by the way, to DU Hockey. Smoked Boston College tonight, 3-0. Gotta like that. We'll hand it over to SportsCenter all night. I'll see you back Monday again. My name's Sean Drotar. Thanks for listening. You can follow me on Twitter if you'd like at SDrotar. That's SDROTAR. Until then, this is Denver Sports Station, Sports Radio 104.3, The Fan.